Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Rhodes. I'm the Senior Vice President with CAMS. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for letting Jeff and I join you virtually today. Jeff is our resident pool expert, so he's going to answer all the hard questions. He's going to let me answer all the easy questions. But we're here to talk to you about summer loving. We're all ready for summer, and we want to help you make sure that your members and your amenities are ready for summer. So how can we help you do that? And who are we? Oh, bear with me. All right. So my name is Cynthia Jones. I'm an attorney with Sellers, Ayers, Dortch Lyons here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I represent a lot of community associations throughout North and South Carolina. I am licensed in both states. So some of what I'm going to talk about today has to do with North Carolina. Actually, most of it has to do with North Carolina. Some of it will have to do with South Carolina. And Jeff, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Sure, I appreciate it. Thank you. I went to a lot less school than Cynthia, so I am just a pool guy at this point in my life. But I'm very proud to be here today representing AquaTech. I've been with AquaTech for 13 years. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and a partner with the company. I'm in the Charlotte branch right now, but we also have branches in Greensboro and Raleigh, and we also do work in South Carolina. So most of our pools are North Carolina, but we will, like Cynthia said, we'll be jumping in some South Carolina stuff as well.
All right, so here's really, we're going to talk about a lot of specific things, but mostly really what are the processes and procedures that you can use to open up your amenities. And by amenities, you know, a lot of what we're talking about has to do with pools. Some of it will have to do with playgrounds. Some of it will have to do with if you have a clubhouse that you want to use or a facility that you rent out on your property. What do you need to do to make sure that those facilities can be opened up to your members and maybe even guests? So I mentioned I will talk about South Carolina some. You will, if you're from South Carolina, you're going to hear us mention it a couple times, but really the South Carolina is the Wild West. And right now there are no strict requirements in South Carolina issued by the governor like there are in North Carolina. So you might very well have some localized requirements depending on what municipality you're in, but statewide in North Carolina, you can open. And as a board member, you can make a decision on what you want to do with your facilities. You're not going to have some of the specific requirements like we do in North Carolina, that because of the executive orders that have been issued by the governor. So Jeff, I know you have some pools in South Carolina, and they're probably just maybe a little bit easier for you these days.
Yeah, I think easier is the right word. I also think there's also that hesitation that any HOA has, right? It's all about protecting yourself and your board members and the community. So I think most of my communities in South Carolina have decided to still have some type of restrictions. And what I mean by restrictions is maybe do some extra cleaning. There's a couple that I can think of that are still doing mask on the deck there as well. Most of them have decided to just kind of back off, but there's always the ones that want to be a little more cautious, but they have the ability to do whatever they want at this point.
Yeah, and that's good. The good thing about the board is your communities, the size of your facilities, the number of people that are typically using the pool, and there's absolutely no problem with implementing some of the things that we're seeing in North Carolina and South Carolina if you want to. There's no problem with it. There's just no requirement for it. So, right. Make a good decision, ask questions, and make a decision as a board, and then go ahead and do it. All right. Well, the big one in North Carolina, I won't say the most recent executive order because we have had some issued since then, not concerning these issues. But this was Executive Order 204. It came out, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's effective until April 30th, 2021. You'll see my note, but I fully expect that it will be extended. I'm sure, Jeff, you are setting things up and operating like that is going to be the rule for the summer.
I totally agree. Yeah, we are basically telling everybody the same thing. Let's plan on this being the rule. If it changes, great, we'll go with it. But I think where we are right now is probably going to stay as well. Yeah,
that's what we expect. And we've kind of seen that throughout this whole process with COVID, especially in North Carolina. He's simply extending some of these restrictions. Now, I will say, when we get into the meat of what he's requiring, the governor's requiring in the executive order, it's changed a little bit from last year, which is good. But you're going to see a lot of similarities to what they had last year as well. So I'm going to stop sharing this for 1 second because I do have a couple poll questions that I want to throw up to everybody. So hopefully you can see these. If you see the questions, if you can answer those questions, there are 3 questions up. Do you have an indoor or outdoor pool or both? Do you have a snack bar? And will you allow guests to use the facilities? And we're going to give everybody just a minute to answer those questions. And you'll see why in a little bit. Oh, there's a lot of communities, actually, I'm surprised, that have both indoor and outdoor pools. Wow. Jeff, do you have a lot of communities that have indoor pools?
I do. I have quite a few, more than we used to about 10 years ago. I think we probably have somewhere around 20 now. Most of them are maybe more of a retirement communities that have an indoor pool to use in the winter, but you don't see them as often. What I really am interested in this poll too, it looks like there's the snack bar question that we talked about, because that really changes a lot of things. So it looks like there's not a lot of people on the call at least that have them too. So.
Yeah, the snack bar, I'm happy to see that not a lot of people said they have a snack
that makes
bar.
It a lot easier.
You'll see why. But I am surprised at the number of people that are going to allow guests to use the facilities. I know a lot of the communities last year said no guests.
That's a very big number. I didn't expect that at all, because I think we run about 330 pools. So I'm just use that number. I would say about half that I've talked to are not allowing guests at this point, unless the order changes. So it's interesting.
All right, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen so everybody can see our. Oh, maybe. All right. So really the 3 main things that we're going to talk about under the Executive Order 204 are capacity limitations, cleaning procedures, and then sign requirements. All right, so this is a big one. And Jeff, I know that you all have been working on this for a while, but I'm going to just go through these, and then maybe you can jump in and just give some practical advice to these boards. And this is kind of why we asked the question of indoor-outdoor pools. In North Carolina, well, really all over, they've learned a lot about COVID in the last year. And so, the Department of Health and Human Services has changed a little bit on some of the guidance that they've given the governor and the guidance they've put out to everyone, because they've learned more about how COVID is transmitted. So you're going to see some big differences in the order, depending on whether the facility, either the pool or the playground, is outside versus inside. And that's just because of the way COVID is transmitted and the fact they're trying to keep numbers lower for inside facilities. So if you have an outdoor pool, it's 100% of the maximum occupancy limit. And if you don't have or don't know the occupancy limit, it's no more than 24 guests per 1,000 square feet in the deck areas, wading pools, splash pads, and in the water. So basically all of the area, you can have 24 guests for every 1,000 square foot. For indoor pools, it's less than that. It's either 75% of the maximum occupancy or 18 guests for every 1,000 square foot. And the way it was explained to me, the numbers that they issued and the guidance they issued last year on how many people could be at a pool were extremely confusing. And so they tried to clarify that this year. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes they're not giving a maximum occupancy limit at an outdoor pool because they may not need to. Like the fire code just doesn't require them to do it.
Exactly.
So that's why they've given the option of, if you have a maximum occupancy limit, you can use that. But if you don't, you're going to have to calculate it by square foot. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Most facilities don't have that number. So this calculation is much easier at this point than what they had last year.
Do you help them, Jeff, figure out, because, the board members aren't going to know, I would not know walking into the pool that I go to, how large it is. Do you help them with those calculations?
We do. We actually, the old fashioned way, Google Earth, we have a program that was actually measuring our decks, and we took a couple days last year to measure out all 330 of our pool decks, including the pool, and do the calculation. So we've done that for all of our clients.
Excellent. So yeah, if you're not with Jeff, you might need to be with Jeff, but if you have another pool company that's helping you in your community, definitely make sure they have done that to help you figure out how much is your square footage, and then calculate based on whether you're inside or outside how many guests you can have, and figure out a way to limit the guests to that number.
And these numbers can be surprisingly large too. If you have a larger facility, I have some, the numbers, we have one facility that we can allow 1,200 people. So it's kind of surprising when you really do the math on some of these larger facilities.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's all about spacing. So what the guidance coming out from the governor's office and from Department of Health and Human Services is they just want people to stay in their groups and stay away from others. So you can do that obviously a little bit easier outdoors than you can indoors, but that's a pretty big number. That's got to be a big facility.
It's a huge facility. Yeah.
Outdoor go ahead.
No, the one thing I wanted to add real quick too, and because I think this is probably the most common question I have last year and this year, is these rules that we're going through and this whole presentation, really, everybody always says, what's the health department going to do? How is this affecting my health inspection? Right now, we are in the thick of health inspections for all our facilities, and the health department is basically like, we're hands off. This has nothing to do with this. It's a law enforcement thing. So, I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that, because it does not affect your health department inspection at all. It is strictly going to be something that if somebody's not following these rules, then it goes to the law enforcement, not the health department.
Yeah, I get asked that a lot too. Who's going to enforce this? And it's a great question. You're absolutely right. The health department has said we're not going to enforce it, but certainly, if local law enforcement sees a big deck party where it's clear that these are consistently being violated, then there is a chance that there's going to be some sort of action out there.
Correct.
Are they going to drive around and check pools? Probably not. They don't have the manpower for that. But we'll get to why later it's still important to follow the rules, even if no one's checking up on you.
Exactly.
Says the attorney. Okay, so outdoor playgrounds. I know a lot of communities have outdoor playgrounds. Really, the governor in North Carolina has simply said, keep your group 6 feet apart from the other groups that are out there. Definitely, I would also say, if you need to go do some cleaning or wipe off the gate, you can certainly do that. But typically, there's enough outdoor air and time that's passing that you're not really having to worry about a lot of people touching the same thing and being concerned about COVID outdoor in a playground. So the restrictions there are pretty slim. Again, indoor playgrounds, very different. They do have an 18 guest per square foot capacity. And I don't know of any communities that I represent that have an indoor playground, but just in case you do, you have to make sure people are staying social distance 6 feet apart and make sure your under that 75% fire capacity or 18 guests per square foot. Now, if you have a clubhouse or amenity area, a lot of communities have these either attached or close by a pool, and you're going to have a meeting or allow people to rent it out. It's considered a private room, so the capacity there is going to be limited to 50% capacity. So make sure, I know a lot of my clients still aren't opening up those areas for rentals. That's certainly fine if you want to wait to open. But if you do open or have meetings, then you need to have something in your contract with the owners or a rule instituted that they're gonna keep that capacity at or below the 50%. Another thing I just want to mention real quick, certainly the board needs to exercise their best judgment in all of these things we're going to talk about today. If you want to make the rules more stringent for your community, you have the right to do that. The board can make the decision on what happens in the common areas of the community, and that's certainly fine. These are simply the minimum guidelines in North Carolina for capacity. I have a lot of clients that are talking about pool furniture. Jeff, I know a lot of communities removed all the chairs and the pool furniture last year. Can you speak a little bit about what's happening with pool furniture that you're seeing?
Sure. I think that's been another huge topic. And overall, if I'm going to put a number on it, I'm going to say 80–90% of them are using their furniture this year. I do have quite a few that are going to limit the amount of furniture. I kind of, some of the meetings I've been to, the feedback is, hey, look, you're not limiting me to go places when I go to the grocery store or the Lowe's. I just know I got to stay 6 feet away from people. So their philosophy is, let's put all the furniture out, and just people need to be smart. And if there's, all the chairs next to each other, choose 6 feet away. We'll see what happens on that in the summer. But I think overall, most of my facilities are going to choose to have the furniture out.
I think people might be happy about that. I know I
think they will. Yes, I agree.
All right. Another thing very specifically talked about in the executive order, cleaning procedures. And this is the language in this I love and hate, as you'll see, but you're required to perform frequent and routine environmental cleaning and disinfection of high touch areas. And it has to be with a specific approved disinfectant that stops the spread of COVID. But, the governor has said in North Carolina, to open your facility, you must do this. This is not optional. So I've had a lot of clients that have said, well, we don't have anyone that staffs our pool. What do we do? And my answer is, if you can't comply with these requirements, these minimum requirements that the governor has issued, then you cannot open. So it does cause a little concern for smaller communities or communities that don't have anyone that staffs the pool as to how do they do this. There's various ways and options. You might be able to have signups for volunteers. You might need to hire someone for the summer to come do this. But if you're going to open in North Carolina, this is not optional. You have to do it.
I think the biggest challenge is, as you stated, frequent and routine. What is that? And my answer is always seek your legal counsel on that, because that's kind of a gray area, right? So what have you been telling people on that?
Yeah, it absolutely is a gray area. It was a gray area last year, and he left it that way this year. It just depends. I had a lot of clients that maybe would open the pool up for 2 hours for groups and then close it and do a wipe down. There's no good answer, and I have absolutely no good answer for what he means or what's meant by frequent and routine. Certainly, I think at least a minimum of once a day would definitely be good. I don't know how you can even make an argument that it's frequent and routine if it's not once a day. But if you have a lot of people coming through your facility, I definitely think you need to consider maybe morning or mid-morning, mid-afternoon, and early evening, depending on how long your pool is open. It's not a bad idea. You can't clean too often.
Right. And so, I think, I'm one of those people that have been going to the gym consistently through this whole thing. I even drove to South Carolina when South Carolina was open, North Carolina wasn't, because I have to go to the gym. But, you know, I look at my responsibility at the gym is I'm cleaning every piece of equipment before and after I touch it. I think it really needs to be a best practice for the pools as well. As you stated, Cynthia, I have 140 pools that don't have any lifeguards. They're service only pools. We are there once a day. And this is the most common question. How do we do this? And it's a challenge for them. As volunteers, we'll do it when we're there once a day, but the rest of the day, we might be there at 7 a.m. So by 7 p.m., you know, nobody's cleaned it. So a lot of them are trying to take volunteers. They've hired cleaning companies to come in multiple days. It is not cheap to hire the cleaning companies, I'll tell you that. So the volunteer way is probably the best way. And then also having the supplies out at those facilities so people can clean up after themselves, I think that shows a lot of due diligence. At least it doesn't, again, frequent routine. If everybody's touching it and they're cleaning it frequently, is that once an hour? Is that 4 times a day? And that's kind of up to the community, I guess.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, there's no, you know, I think of things like the stairs in and out of the pool that are probably used way more than, you know, someone opening the gate to the kiddie pool. I don't know. But
Right.
things like that, yeah, you should be. Definitely, it's not a problem to have things out and ask people to clean things off as they use them. I know there's a lot of people doing that anyway. I love that idea. I don't think that should take the place of somebody with the association or volunteering or hired to do it at least at some point. And I've put kind of some practical advice here, just that I've been telling clients on, you know, the governor has set these standards out. I really think it's important, if you're going to open, let's follow the standards and then keep track of that. So I suggest that you develop a plan that identifies the areas at your pool that need to be cleaned, how frequently they need to be cleaned, and with what disinfectant they're using. And then whoever's doing the disinfecting, keep a log of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to vary from association to association and pool to pool. The smaller pools are not going to need it as often as maybe the larger pools. So, but the board needs to get together, talk to your pool professional, talk to your attorney if you want, and just come up with a good plan and then implement it and stick to it. All right. Sign requirements. Jeff, we didn't talk about this, but do you have a company that helps do the signs for the pools?
We do. We actually, we have a sign made for every one of our facilities. Again, we weren't sure what was going to happen this last month or not, but we've had it queued up since January. It's actually being processed right now. A majority of my facilities open May 1st, and they stay open later. So we're trying to get these out pretty quick. So we'll have to have them out prior to opening, but we've done professional sign that's going to last. Last year it was so quick with the 2-day notice that we laminated things and put them up, and they were wet. And so we've got a nice sign for every facility that we manage. That's
fantastic. Yeah. So this is another requirement. We talked about the capacity limitations earlier, and once you know that number, you have to post that number. So I have it in here, emergency maximum occupancy. That's the language that the governor has used in the orders in North Carolina. Put it in a noticeable place. I mean, at the pool we used, it was right, zip tied to the front gate when you walk right in. So yeah, I think it's great that they're going to be good signs. I don't think that this is going away anytime soon. So definitely the signs are going to have to at least last through this season.
I agree.
Along with that sign for emergency maximum occupancy, you also need to post signs reminding guests and workers about social distancing and requesting people who have been symptomatic with a fever and or a cough that they not enter. So, that kind of, most people had those signs out last year. The North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services has a ton of information on their website. I mean, almost an overload of information. And I know the governor's office and Department of Health and Human Services also have some draft signs. If you are a smaller pool and you don't have a professional sign, you can just Google and go to their websites, and you can find draft signs that meet all these requirements in North Carolina that you can post. And like I said earlier, in South Carolina, You're not subject to these requirements, but if you want to post information reminding guests about social distancing, if you're sick, not to come into the pool, I think that's a great idea. And I would just, there's no reason you can't use the signs that they have in North Carolina. I did not go to South Carolina's website to see if DHEC had those in South Carolina. They might very well have some signs. But definitely, even if you can't have a professional sign made, certainly laminate one. They can be zip tied to the fence. They'll make it through a couple of our summer storms, but they're things that aren't optional, and you've got to have those up when you open the pool. All right, so here we're going to get into a little bit of why we asked some of the polling questions that we asked. I love that not many of you will have snack bars operating, only because the requirements that the governor has placed upon you if you have a snack bar are more like a restaurant. And so I don't know if you all have seen the Executive Order 204, but it's about 40 pages long and it's hard to read. And there are lots of references back and forth throughout the order on the things you have to follow. And one of the things that's easily missed is if you have a snack bar, you have to follow the restaurant guidance. It means you have to have face coverings for all your workers and guests when they're not actively eating or drinking. Yes, that means if they're, sitting at a table and they're not eating and drinking, they need to have a mask on. You need to follow the limitations in seating areas and other health and safety restrictions, including disinfecting and marking 6-foot spacing. So like if they're coming to a window to order snacks, you're going to need to mark on your floor a 6-foot spacing, kind of like you see in the grocery stores and things like that. You're going to have to do that at your snack bar. I didn't go into a ton of detail here about all of those restaurant requirements, but just know if you're operating a snack bar, there's additional requirements that you're going to have to fulfill. And you probably need to speak with your pool professionals. You need to speak probably with your attorney and make sure you're meeting all that guidance that's in the executive order having to do with serving food in snack bars. The other one is events with spectators. So Jeff and I spoke about this earlier today. A lot of pools in the area have swim meets. And I know our neighborhood has a swim team. We're operating a little bit differently this year in that we're not going to other pools to do swim meets. We're going to swim all at our pool. And I think, Jeff, you said a lot of the neighborhoods are doing the same thing.
Yeah, correct. The virtual meet seems to be pretty popular, where you're competing against someone virtually. So you're swimming at the same time and you're sharing your scores or your times across a virtual platform. Yeah,
the good thing about that is it keeps the spectators low. I mean, if you've ever been to a swim meet, the pool deck is packed with parents and siblings and everybody.
Well over 100% capacity. Well over. They always are. There's no capacity limits when it comes to swim meets.
That's right.
Pack them in like sardines.
That's changed this year. So
yeah, exactly.
With the virtual meets, it's going to really help. But because you're probably, and I haven't seen, the guidance yet on what we're doing with spectators, whether parents can come watch their kids swim. But if you are going to have an event with a spectator, like a swim meet, and you're going to allow spectators to come watch, even if it's like one parent for each child, you need to be aware that the capacity limitations change. So if there's a spectator event, it's 50% of the fire capacity or 12 people per 1,000 square foot, and social distancing obviously is required. So I think the earlier number was 24 for an outdoor pool, if I'm
correct.
Remember that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so this really bumps it down lower. You need to be aware if you let people come watch, that's fine. You just need to make sure you're under that 50% capacity or 12 people per square foot. You should also have any spectators or guests, when they're not swimming, wearing face coverings. And I've already heard a lot of talk about this and people complaining that they're getting a mask sunburn because they're not applying sunscreen across their whole face, and then they put a mask on and take it off and they get burned. So beware. When you take your mask off, put some sunscreen on. But really, if they're not swimming, they're not eating, if they're a spectator, they need to have a mask on. Now, I fully understand, and Jeff, I'm sure you do as well. Enforcement of that is difficult. I don't know how you're going to do it. I'm not certainly insinuating that you have your lifeguards at the pool go around and tell people to put their masks on, but definitely I think a sign would be great, reminding people when they're not in the pool to please use a face covering, whether they do or don't. I understand you can't make them do it, but they're supposed to. So a gentle reminder is nice.
I think the key is lifeguards are there to watch water and save lives. I mean, sure, there's multi-guard pools where people are sitting at the gate and they can remind them, but our company stands as our guards are not COVID police. They would be watching the water. They're there to save lives. Everything else is going to be on the community to monitor.
You make a great point, Jeff, because that's absolutely true. I think the hard part last year was some of the communities that did open that had lifeguards is a lot of them felt like, well, it was just going to be on the lifeguard to wipe everything down. And that's not, I mean, I don't think the board should be thinking about it like that. Definitely the duty of the lifeguard is to make sure that there's not an incident in the pool or around on the pool deck. But the cleaning procedures and other things like that, I mean, you very well might have to hire someone else to do that, or someone in addition to your lifeguards to do that. And I know many communities are doing that. They included it in their budget at the end of last year because they thought that this was coming around again. And they increased the amount they were having to spend for their amenities, both the pool and the clubhouse facilities and the playgrounds, because they have had to implement these cleaning procedures. And like you said, Jeff, it's not cheap.
It's not at all. And it's, I know there's a lot of companies out there that are specializing in marketing to our facilities that they'll come in and do this. So there's people out there willing to do it. It's just, you're gonna pay for it.
Yep. All right. Obviously, immediately isolate and remove sick workers. By now, we've all heard that a lot. That is not something new. You should definitely continue to keep doing that. And then be mindful, and Jeff, you're probably doing this, but be mindful of scheduling workers and consider things like group scheduling. Because if you think about it practically, if you schedule one lifeguard on Monday that works with 4 other lifeguards, and then you split them all up on Tuesday, and you find out on Wednesday that somebody's tested positive, all of those people have to be quarantined, right?
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge we had last year. And it usually wasn't somebody getting COVID from the facility. It was the lifeguard that went to the beach with his parents, came back 3 days later, worked with everybody at the facility, and then, I've got COVID now. So then everybody has to get their test and the pool has to be shut down. Luckily, it didn't happen that often, but it certainly happened. More frequently was the fact that they were exposed to somebody when they went to the beach last year. And then they came back, and then we had to make sure everybody who they worked with and pull them off the schedule. So it's tough, especially during vacation times when a lot of the kids are gone and everybody has to kind of pull together. You get a lot of people working, and then you have people from other pools crossing pools to cover schedules too. It can get kind of hairy for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've seen mostly, even in the school systems as well, is they're not necessarily contracting COVID at the facilities that are open. It's they're bringing it in. So anybody at the facilities they've had contact with, it makes them have to quarantine. And that's going to be something that we continue to have to deal with. And so definitely, I know that makes your job much harder, Jeff, but I'm sure all the boards and associations appreciate the fact that you won't have 20 people hopefully going out at once because you're switching up schedules. But I know it makes for long nights for you.
It does. It does. Well, my managers, let's put it that way. But yes, it does make for very long nights. And it's just, the biggest thing is our guards, they have to go through screening prior to working every day. So they have the questionnaire, they have to fill the paperwork out. So they understand the importance of it. And I think they really bought in last year very early. So they really understand, what they need to do to keep everyone safe.
Do your guards have face masks, Jeff, that they're wearing while they're guarding?
They do. So they don't have to, because we have our stands have a 6-foot barrier around them, or at least tape marking to say stay 6 feet back. It's really hot, obviously. So we allow them to take it off while they're on the stand. It's just like a restaurant, though. If you're sitting at a table, you take it off. Once they get off the stand, they have to put it back on.
So let me ask, what do you do if you have an incident where they have to go into the water? Do they remove their mask, or you think they're comfortable going in with it?
I think that most of them are understand that challenge of going in the water with that. And luckily, I don't think I had a single time when it had to happen last year, but I think I know we talk about in the training class to obviously remove the mask before you get in. Excellent. So, and trying to make it second nature.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, the greatest thing that I've seen work efficiently is, of course, notification to people of what we expect of them while they're at these facilities, and then model that behavior. Your community will not wear masks on the pool deck if they see the board members on the pool deck with no masks. Correct. So definitely keep that in mind, as you would anywhere, but certainly set a good example would be a great way to start. All right, everybody's favorite topic. Let's talk about liability. We had to deal with this, and we all scrambled a little bit. Well, we all scrambled on many things last year, but one of the things that we did a lot of last year were we had a lot of clients that wanted to open. They could conform to the requirements set by the governor in North Carolina and or South Carolina. And they wanted to make sure that they were protected in case somebody did, have a claim against them for contracting COVID at the facility, whatever that facility was. So we worked a lot and did a lot of waivers, liability waivers for any kind of facility, a pool, a tennis court, a basketball court, a clubhouse. And the waivers are difficult to do. It's hard to do a good waiver and have it be really enforceable and cover every option. Of course, the hardest thing in any kind of claim that would arise under COVID would be, trying to prove where they contracted it. That is extremely difficult to do. We all know that because of the contract tracing that's been going on. But definitely, how do you know if you got it at the grocery store or while you're at work or from your kid's school or while you're at the pool? You don't know that. But last year we did draft a lot of waivers for clients for these kinds of situations. The good news is in North Carolina, I say North Carolina because South Carolina has not addressed this issue yet. I don't know if they will. But in North Carolina, there was some legislation passed that does protect the association from claims of people that are claiming they contracted COVID at facilities. Now, there's two statutes that are up on the screen. One of them is just for a general liability, and then one of them specifically talks about pools, and because pools were such a big issue last year. So for the pools, as long as they're operating in accordance with the executive orders, a claim for liability for someone that could possibly contracted COVID at the pool isn't going to be valid. However, if there is gross negligence, intentional wrongdoing, things like that involved, that's excluded. And you notice I said, as long as you're operating in accordance with the governor's orders. So you want to make sure, like I mentioned earlier, when you're doing cleaning, when you have your capacity limitations set up, you want to make sure you're tracking those. So if somebody tries to raise a claim against the association, you can show that you've, number one, complied with the orders, and here's the logs showing that we've done that, the cleaning and things like that. Or, and you want to be able to show there's no gross negligence involved. Now, like I said, South Carolina does not have legislation that exists out there for this. So some communities, if you're in South Carolina, you might decide, yes, we want to open, but we also want to try and get a waiver drafted. So anybody using the pool is required to sign a waiver before they come in. So those are all things that you need to think about when you're opening these kinds of facilities. Is what are we required to do in the state? If there's local requirements, what are we required to do there, if anything? And then how are we going to track that, and how are we going to, show that if anyone makes a claim? And then do we want to do anything else? You can always also have a waiver signed even in North Carolina, even though we have this legislation out there. That's not a problem. The board gets to decide in their best judgment what's best for the community, and you can make that decision.
I also want to add to that. I know with the waiver, I didn't have that many communities that did it, but the ones that came to us, again, I'll reiterate, the guards are there to guard. So pulling a guard off a stand to make sure somebody's got a waiver is just not going to happen. It's something that's got to be done outside of the pool facility, done by the community. The property management company can help, whatever it might be, but it's not something that really, unless you have a very large facility that has multiple guards, maybe 6 guards on duty where somebody's sitting at a check-in desk, I can see that working. But anything smaller than that, you just no manpower for the guards to do that. So make sure you kind of come up with a good game plan.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, CAMS, I'm sure, can help with some of that. I know some of the communities that we saw wouldn't provide the passes to the pool that they have unless they had a waiver on file.
Right.
And some of them also said, we're not going to allow guests for the summer for that reason. Or if you have a guest, then we're going to require that guest to sign a waiver. So I'm sure, talk to your manager with CAMS, because definitely they'll have some good advice there. If you need to get your attorney involved, definitely do that as well. But Ben and the group at CAMS can certainly help with some of that.
Ben, you popped in. Did you want to add something to that?
Well, I knew that the questions were coming up, so I decided to.
Great.
It's good to see you.
But I guess as a reminder, if you do have questions, please use the Q&A chat feature at the bottom, or the Q&A feature, and we'll answer those and moderate those questions as they come in. So Cynthia, one of the questions that came in was about a potential bill that recently passed in South Carolina. Are you aware of any bills that passed affecting COVID in South Carolina?
I am not, no. Now that's not to say I was on spring break last week, so if it happened very recently, I am not aware of it. But no, South Carolina's been relatively silent through all of this. So I don't know if that's good or bad, or just leaving it up to the owners of the facilities, but I'm not aware of anything right now.
Okay. Another question that was asked was about what is the responsibility of the board members to enforce and pursue the various rules that exist within the community?
That's a good question. I'd say that your responsibility to do that is just, you're going to enforce them just like you would any other rules in your community, right? So if you have somebody in your community who's put up a fence that's not authorized, you've got a procedure for dealing with that. If you have somebody that's parking in violation of the parking rules, you've got a procedure to deal with that. Definitely, if you've adopted additional rules for your common area facilities to deal with during COVID, you need to enforce those just like you do anything else. That might mean you're sending violation letters. It might mean you're calling owners to a hearing. If you find you have a family that continues to use the facilities in violation of the posted requirements and the requests to stay 6 feet away and wear face masks on the pool deck, you might very well have to call them to a hearing and talk to them about it. And, I don't think people should be treated any differently due to COVID. I just think these are just additional rules you're going to have to enforce like anything else.
Okay. Another question. So you talked a little bit about high touch areas. How would you define a high touch area?
I'll jump in real quick first. Our checklist for our lifeguards is anything within reason that is maybe consistently touched by all the patrons. So bathroom handles, front door gates, side door gates, and handrails are the biggest items. Now, last year we didn't have a lot of furniture out there, so there was very few places that had furniture. This year, the furniture, a lot of questions on that. I don't necessarily know if I have the right answer on the furniture. I don't know if we're going to be doing. Some places have hundreds of chairs. It would take forever to disinfect. But so the guards, at least on our side, are going to be touching the handrails and the doorknobs and the gates.
Well, and what I've seen too is some communities that are leaving furniture out. They are not, they're leaving that up to the people that are choosing to use the
Right.
furniture. So they're saying, if you use it, before you use it and after you use it, here's some wipes, wipe it down.
Right.
Okay, and that maybe segue into our next question is with frequent cleaning, and we talked a little bit about gyms, and maybe gyms put some of the liability back on the individual that is using the area. At service pools or unguarded facilities, once a day cleaning and then some responsibility to the members, would that comply with the order?
Well, let's see. So the order was that you have to perform frequent and routine environmental cleaning and disinfection of high touch areas. So, like I said, if you're a smaller pool and you don't have someone out there, is once a day enough? Maybe. Do you need to do twice a day? You might need to do twice a day. But definitely, I think you need to do something every day. I don't think it's sufficient to just leave it up to members that use the facility to wipe down those areas that Jeff mentioned, like the ladders going in and out and the gate coming in and out and the bathroom doors. I don't think that my interpretation of the governor's order is you have to do something. How often you do it and what areas you do, he's kind of leaving open. But I don't think you can simply say to your membership, if you're going to use the pool, you have to wipe everything down after you touch it and consider that compliance with the governor's order. I don't consider that compliance with the governor's order.
Okay. Pool furniture. Jeff, I think you talked a little bit about more communities are leaving their pool furniture out this year. Should the board be concerned about the 6 foot apart rule for pool furniture?
Yeah, it's a topic of discussion right now with everyone. I think the challenge is going to be the space, right? If you've got 100% capacity and you do leave out this 6 foot spacing, you got a family of 4, you put 4 chairs there, you put 2 chairs there, you're going to be pretty limited on your furniture amount again. So I think if I were to poll just my facilities, I think more people are just putting all the furniture out and expecting the patrons to stay 6 feet apart. So you leave 2 chairs in between the next person. That seems to be the way to go. I do know there are some places that are not putting all the furniture out and leaving the spacing, but most of my communities are actually using all their furniture and just telling people to be smart and use the 6 foot in between the chairs.
Then what should the expectation be for if there is a facility monitor or a lifeguard to go and rearrange the furniture?
Very low, and they're not going to. The guards, the way it's set up, they have a 10-minute break. That 10-minute break, they have to check the water. They will be doing, in most of our cases this year, a lot of facilities decide not to close for a cleaning. They'll have to do a touch point cleaning, then also get a break, rest their eyes. Obviously, we want our guards not to be weary when they're up on the stand. So moving furniture is not part of our checklist at all.
Yeah, it's probably not something the guards are going to do. There might be some pools that hire, like we talked about, an independent person to come in. But, watching and trying to monitor the pool furniture to make sure it's 6 feet apart, I mean, that's a pretty tough job. It would be hard for a teenage lifeguard or even an adult lifeguard to try and deal with owners doing that. And quite frankly, it's a never-ending thing.
Right.
I mean, practically speaking, it's going to be extremely difficult to have somebody do that. Some of this stuff we just have to the board just has to look at it and make a good decision on if we're posting signs and we're telling people, if you use the pool furniture, please make sure you're 6 feet away. Just like if you're in the facility and you're not swimming, please wear your mask and things like that. You know, some of this responsibility we have to put on the members, but it's going to be really hard to keep rearranging that pool furniture, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, restrictions, I think this was one of your opening slides, but there was a question about how many people can be in the pool at one time. And that had, I think it was 18 per 1,000 square feet.
So I think that might be referring to our requirements from last year, which seemed to have a distinction between how many people could be on the deck and how many people could be in the pool. And it was, like I said, extremely confusing, hard to figure out the numbers. This year, there's no limit to how many can be in the pool. The limit is for an outdoor pool, 24 guests for every 1,000 square feet. And quite frankly, they can all be in the pool at the same time. The governor doesn't have that kind of limitation in the order for this year. They just need to stay 6 feet apart for people outside their family unit, which good luck enforcing that in a pool.
Yeah.
But he doesn't this year place a limitation on how many in the pool.
Okay. So there was maybe a difference between an event at the pool and the regular pool space requirements. Is the mask requirement on a pool deck only when there is an event?
No, the mask requirement for the pool or for any facility is if you're a spectator and if you're not in the pool and you're not actively eating and drinking, if you have a snack bar, you should have a mask on.
Okay.
So, you know, like we all love to jump in the pool and cool off and then come lay out and get a beautiful tan during the summer. When you're laying out, you need to have a mask on. You should have a mask on. And that's why I mentioned make sure you put that sunscreen on. But no, it's not just for spectators. It's also for users at the pool. If they're on the deck and not swimming, they should have a mask.
So if you don't want to wear a mask, jump in the pool.
Yes, stay in the pool.
Exactly.
Get nice
Stay in the
wrinkly
pool.
fingers.
So how about in South Carolina? So
Yeah.
if a pool or a board wants to require masks in South Carolina with no orders that exist, is that a reasonable rule that could be adopted?
Yeah, so look, any board that's considering any rules for any part of the community, you have the authority to do that. You are in control of those common areas. If you want to make sure that the association is protected and you want to implement some additional procedures and requirements, yes, the board can make that decision because you are the governing body for the association. I do think, you know, like I said, the rules that you implement are going to vary so widely from community to community. As Jeff knows, like you've got big pools, you've got small pools, you have indoor and outdoor pools, you have wading ponds. You know your community best and you know your members best. And you just need to decide what's a good requirement for you if you want to have them and then implement it and let your members know. It might not be a bad idea to ask for some feedback from members. What do they think? You might get some interesting responses from members that you'd be surprised at, but definitely, yes, the board can do that.
So if a community doesn't have a lot of volunteers to support the pool, should they consider reducing how it's open? Should it, you know, if it's a service only pool, should, you know, I guess, do they recommend opening a half day or limiting the hours that exist?
I think you need to look at all of that. I mean, we saw last year, a lot of communities did a lot of different things. Some of them had signups where you had to sign up for a specific time and you could go for your time block and they limited it to, you know, 20 people. And then that was it for the day. You didn't get another sign up and you had to sign up again the next day if you wanted to go back. We had some that just said, we're going to let the first 100 people in the pool for this 2-hour block, and then we're closing it. Everyone has to leave for 30 minutes so we can wipe everything down, and then we open it up for the next 2-hour block. So it really just depends on what works best for the community.
I think the biggest challenge of all the communities comes back to what Ben said too about the service pools. I think we did really well with our guarded pools. I think everybody did a really great job. Board members, community members, and our guards. Service pools, it was kind of a free for all. Because there is no one there, and I don't think the ordinance really delves into or really thought about the fact that we have such a large amount of pools in North Carolina that do not have lifeguards. So I don't know how a service pool can technically comply unless they have somebody over there doing this periodic cleaning. It's just technically, I just don't think there's a way to do it.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And remember, that calls into question too, when I talked about the liability statutes that have been implemented in North Carolina, you're only eligible for that if you're following that guidance issued by the governor in the executive order. So, a lot of this ties in together. Really, if you're a small pool like that and you don't have people to help, you really should be talking to your community manager first, and you probably need to get some guidance from your attorney on, what should we do and what can we consider and what options do we have?
Right.
You mentioned a proper disinfectant. Do you know where one would go about getting what is considered a proper disinfectant?
Amazon. No, I'm just kidding. Jeff, you probably, I don't know. I mean, we have them here, but I don't order them. So you probably have more knowledge about that than I do.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, I don't know what the label says specifically. We went to a contractor and said, what is proper disinfectant? They handed them to us and we said, we'll buy 4,000 cases of it, whatever it might be in our warehouse. So I know it has to have a label, something on the label that has to do with the SARS and coronavirus on there. As we all know, this is not our first coronavirus. So it has to have something on the label, right?
Yeah, it says, so the governor's order says an EPA approved disinfectant for SARS-CoV-2 or CoV-2, which is the thing that causes COVID. So I don't know the name of it, but definitely you want to make sure. I would go to North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services website. They probably have additional information on it. And I do think, Jeff, I think you're absolutely right. I think it has to have a special designation on it. Be careful because I jokingly said Amazon, don't go to Amazon and just type it in because there's going to be stuff out there that's not sufficient. So maybe I shouldn't have said that, but.
I guess there's another question that's come in about mask requirements on the pool deck. So a little bit of confusion around, an event versus, non-event days. So just to clarify, a mask should always be worn on the pool deck if you're not swimming, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, whether you are sunbathing just on a Saturday afternoon watching your kids swim, or you are standing on the side watching your kids compete in a swim meet, if you are not in the pool, you should have a mask on.
In North Carolina?
Yes, in North Carolina, yes.
Well, right now I think that answers most of the questions, or at least all the questions. It is 5:32. So right on time, or at least almost on time. So thank you very much. We are recording this, so we will be posting it on the camsmgt.com website. And so if you do want to share any information with your other board members, feel free to give them that website and direct them to the webinar page. So Cynthia, Jeff, we do thank you for your time, and I hope to see everybody at the next event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, good night.
All right, bye-bye.